We've talked about congruent line segments and congruent angles, but in Chapter 4, we're going to start looking at congruent shapes or figures. After today, I want you to be able to name congruent figures, find congruent sides and angles in congruent figures, and then use congruence to find missing measurements. Congruent figures are two shapes with all corresponding sides that are congruent and congruent corresponding angles. Not all the sides have to be congruent, but the corresponding angle from one figure to the other, corresponding side from one figure to the other, has to be the same size. What I mean by that is if I name my congruence triangle ABC, then I know that AB, which are the first two letters in that congruence statement, has to be congruent to DE, which are the first two letters in the other figure. So, and then I know that BC has to be congruent to EF because they're corresponding in the statement, so they would also be corresponding sides of the figures. And then the last side, AC, would have to be congruent to DF. The same thing is true with angles, the corresponding angles. So angle A would have to be congruent to angle D because they're listed first. Angle B would have to be congruent to angle E, and angle C would be congruent to angle F. If I wanted to name this diagram, I would have to, once I call this one ABC, then I'm going to make sure that the letters D, E, F line up with those sides, so that angle A and angle D are congruent. Angle B and angle E are congruent. And C and F are congruent. And then the same for the sides, AB and DE, BC and EF, and AC and D. I wrote the wrong one. DF. Okay. If I highlight, you can kind of see, okay, those are lining up. They're in order. If I'm, instead of being told which triangles are congruent, I have to write a congruent statement, I can put the first triangle in any order. So I can say, oh, triangle DCB. I just chose some letter order. Then, when I'm naming my congruent statement, I have to pay attention to which sides are congruent. So DC and HI are the sides that are marked with 2 tick marks. So since I started naming this one DC, I should start naming the other one with HI. Oh, I need a triangle sign. And then the next side that's congruent would be CB, so I need to make sure that I am calling the next side HG. It looks like I called mine in the wrong order, so I have to change this so that it matches. I'm going to call this IH. And then HG. So now I've labeled it in the correct order. I think it's easier to name a triangle using angles rather than sides. So if I pay attention to the angle markings instead of the side markings, if I start with the angle at G, then that's going to be like the angle at B because they're the ones with one marking on them. And then if I move to the angle H, that's the one with 2 markings, so that's going to be like C. and the last one would be D and I. So I think it's easier to do your congruence statement from angles, but you could also do it from sides. You just have to be careful. Okay. I have a chance for you to write congruent statements here. So if you were in class, you would do this one on your own. And I'm asking you to do congruent statements here. So in class, you would do this one on your own. And then I also asked you to use, I'm going to ask you to use congruence to find missing measurements. So if I know the measure of angle A is 19, I'm going to go ahead and draw kind of a picture of what that might look like. A is about 19 degrees. Then I know that angle D is also 19 degrees. So I'll draw a picture of that. And then angle E is 122 degrees. So I know that angle B would be 122 degrees. And it asks me to find the measure of angle F. I can do that because now I know this triangle has to add up to 180, so I'll do 19 plus 122, which is 131. And the triangle has to add up to 180, so I'm going to do 180 minus 131, and I get 49. So I can use that to figure out what angle F is. Number 6 is similar to that, but with some X's on there. So I'm going to go ahead and I don't know how big they are, so I'm just going to draw A, B, C. And then I'm going to draw D, E, F that's like A, B, C. Actually, I probably should have given myself more room for algebra. A, B, angle A is 5x plus 9 degrees, and angle B is 9x plus 1 degrees, and angle E is 12x minus 26 degrees. Oh, now I know that because angle B is congruent to angle E, I can use that to figure out what x is. So I can say, 9x plus 1 is equal to 12x minus 26. If I add 26, I get 27. Subtract 9, I get 3x. So x is equal to 9. Once I know x is equal to 9, I can figure out angle F because it's the same size as angle C. And if those two are the same size, I actually should have marked this with a different marking. Since those two are the same size, it should add up to 180 with this triangle. So if I plug in 9, B is 81 plus, so 82 degrees is angle B, and angle A would be 5 times 9 plus 9. 45 plus 9 would be 54 degrees. So those two added together, 82 plus 54, gives me 136, and I know the whole triangle has to be 180. So 180 minus 136 gives me 44. If this angle is 44, then I also know angle F is 44. All right, these are the concepts you're going to be using for tonight's homework. Thanks so much. Bye.